Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Moss Park virtual information session on piling construction. We'll give 1 or 2 minutes just for people to join the meeting. We know people may not be able to make it right on time, so we'll admit people as they're joining, and then we'll start the meeting shortly. Hey, hello, everyone. My name is Sean Major, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Community Engagement for the Ontario Line. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Moss Park virtual information session on piling construction. And we'd like to start off tonight's meeting with a land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. So let us take a moment to acknowledge we are on the lands that have been and continue to be home to many Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, as immigrants, or involuntarily as part of the transatlantic slave trade in this generation or generations past. We acknowledge the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on territories and lands covered by many treaties that affirm and value the rights of Indigenous communities, nations, and peoples. We understand the importance of working towards reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. At Metrolinx, we will conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Next slide, please. And at Metrolinx, we like to start all our meetings with a safety moment. It's always important to be aware of our surroundings and try to stay as safe as possible, particularly on transit. So some quick tips for a safer commute. Always mind the gap and watch your step. Hold on. There's always handrails and grab bars to prevent falls while riding the train. And stay alert and report any surroundings, any suspicious activities in your surroundings. Respect personal space, avoid crowding fellow passengers, and keep your bags clear of the walkways to prevent accidents. And be sure to watch your step. The weather is all over the place, so sometimes it can be slippery out there. Before we start our journey, if you can familiarize yourself with where you're going and schedule to navigate and confidently avoid any delays. Next slide, please. So welcome again, everyone. It's great to have you all here as we talk about piling activities in the Moss Park area. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Sean Major, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Community Engagement with Metrolinx for the Ontario Line. And I'll invite all our presenters today to turn on their cameras, and we'll introduce folks. They'll introduce themselves. So I'll turn it to Daniel to introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Daniel Sisra. I'm a senior manager with the Subways sponsor team here at Metrolinx. Hi, everyone. I'll pass it over to Eric.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric De Vera. I am the Deputy Station Manager for Moss Park, and it is my responsibility to safely and proficiently deliver and construct the Moss Park Station for the community. I will pass it over to my colleague, Francisco, or Aga, if Francisco is not here.
Good evening. My name is Aga Szczotka, and I'm Environmental Manager for OTG.
Great, thank you, Aga. Next slide, please. So want to talk through the agenda for tonight's meeting. We'll have a quick overview of the Ontario Line, speak to some progress to date, and look ahead at the construction that's coming. And of course, tonight we want to really focus on the piling work that's going to be happening in Moss Park. And at Metrolinx, it's really critical that we are working together to try and reduce any impacts on community members as a result of the construction. We'll also have a Q&A and discussion at the end of the meeting, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Just in terms of meeting guidelines, we really want to keep this meeting flowing and have folks feel comfortable and that it's a respectful space. So we definitely request that everyone be respectful in your questions and in the discussion with fellow participants and panelists. If you can keep your question brief, and we would ask for one question at a time. If you have a second question, we can definitely loop back to you. As I mentioned, we'll have some dedicated time for questions. And today's meeting will be focused primarily on the construction impacts in the Moss Park area, as I mentioned. So if there's other topics that come up, we may connect with you by phone or email, or we'll speak to those topics at the Moss Park CLSC, because we really want to make sure we have the time to speak to the piling work and the impact of that. Next slide, please. So hopefully folks aren't having audio issues, but if you are having problems where you can't speak when we unmute you, I would invite you to either use the Slido feature, or you can also join by phone. The phone number is 437-703-4197. And when prompted, you can put in the code that's on screen, 771-575-632#. So that's just if you have any audio issues tonight, that's a place where you can join us alternatively. Next slide, please. So an option we have also for tonight, and you may have seen it on the invite, is to ask your questions through Slido. So I'll encourage everyone to put in your questions to Slido as they come to you while you're watching the presentation, and we'll definitely go to those Slido questions. If you prefer to speak your question out, we'll also have an opportunity for people to have their questions answered by raising your hand, and we'll unmute you and you can speak your question out. But if you're using Slido, you can visit slido.com and enter the code that's on screen, 1314749. Or if you wish and you're joining on your smartphone, you can scan the QR code that's on screen. Next slide, please. So I'll turn over to Daniel to speak to some details about the Ontario line.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so I'll introduce you to the project. I'm hoping that a lot of you have heard about the Ontario Line. The Ontario Line is a 15.6 kilometer subway line that we'll be building through the city of Toronto. It will be going from Exhibition Station, as you've seen on the screen at the bottom left corner, where roughly we have a 1 there. Then it will go underground in the blue line, cutting through downtown along underneath Queen Street. Heading farther east towards the Riverside, Leslieville area, before it heads north on Pape Street, cutting through Pape Station underneath Pape Station that's there, and farther north towards Thorncliffe Park, and eventually terminating at the Eglinton and Don Mills future station for Crosstown Science Center there. Just some kind of key facts around Ontario Line. Ontario Line will be a 15 stations subway line that will very frequent service, as frequent as 90-second service during rush hour. It will service a huge number of individuals and communities in the areas that it's touching, and even through connections. Over 200,000 people will be at walking distance to the stations. This will basically generate over 380,000 daily boardings, which means a lot of people taking the subway. The way the Ontario Line was designed and planned really encourages, was with the intention of creating connections and increasing reliability of the overall transit network, with over 40 connections, that being some major connections at the Queen Osgood stations for the Line 1, connections at Pape, where this line will Midline 2, TTC lines, as well as many TTC, streetcar, and bus connections, and 2 future major connections at GO services in Exhibition Station and East Farquhar. So just kind of wrapping up here, we strongly believe that this will create opportunity for people to access jobs either faster or better, and generally reduce the need for using cars or having cars on the road. If you could go to the next slide. So the Ontario Line is being delivered by various contracts. today we'll introduce you to the Ontario Transit Group, who is a delivery joint venture with Ferrovial and Vinci Construction Grants project that is delivering the south, what we call the south segment or the southern portion of the Ontario line, which is highlighted on the right-hand side in yellow. It's basically the portion between Exhibition Station and just east of Corktown Station. The OTG group, the OTG Ontario Transit Group, will be delivering 6 underground stations. 2 of those are very important interchange stations and complex interchange stations right underneath the existing subway at Oxford and Queen, and they will do that while not impacting and maintaining the operations of those 2 stations, as well as one also major connection, one above ground connection at Exhibition Station. Finally, while also building all the stations, the OTG will be delivering and building a tunnel between all these stations in the downtown. That's around 6 kilometers of tunnel. So with that, I will hand it over to Eric to take us through the construction aspect of Mosspark.
Thank you, Daniel. So as detailed before, the main purpose of this program tonight is to discuss the piling operation and what the community can expect from that at Moss Park. But first, I'd like to give a little bit of context of what we've been doing to lead up to this milestone for the station, and then what we can expect after the piling completion. Since the fall of 2023, in November, we have been installing what we call protection and preparation. For the protection, it is the hoarding installation, which is just a fancy way of calling our site perimeter fencing. If you've been in the area recently, that would be the plywood perimeter that we've developed around the site. Its primary purpose is for the public safety, to delineate the public from the construction activities within the site, but it does provide additional benefits as well, which we will look to touch base on later in the presentation. And then for preparation, we have been rehabilitating the site within the fencing there to construct a working platform that's going to be suitable for the duration of the project, and that's to allow us to deliver the station proficiently and safely. All of those efforts have been leading up to today, or to this week, which we are now ready to begin piling. And so in the coming days, you will see the program that we talk about this evening, which is going to allow us to begin the piling program. After we complete the piling program, the next steps beyond that in the summer timeframe are going to be the station excavation, and after that will be the construction of the station from the ground up. But we'll provide some more context on that later. Next slide, Amanda, please. As always, we always try and provide some visual context to the community and to the group to help better understand what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. And so here's a very good visualization of Moss Park as it was a couple of weeks ago through our progress in February. You kind of get an overlook from the Queen Street side here. Very visible, the perimeter protection, what we call the hoarding around the edge of the site, and then a little bit of context of what goes on inside the site for the platform preparation. As it is today, it's a little bit more complete, which is ready for piling commencement. But again, this is to help people understand kind of the methodology and the process involved in our works. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit more focus on the pile drilling. Before going right into detail, I'd like to emphasize the word drilling specifically. I think it's very natural for people to anticipate the word piling with pile driving, which is another methodology that's pretty common in Ontario and in Canada in general. The unfortunate stigma about pile driving is the invasiveness, the impact. It's pile driving, hammering. But the good news is we're not pile driving, we are pile drilling. And that's hopefully going to be for the great benefit of the community and the local environment, as it should be much less invasive and impactful to the local surrounding. So what is piling? It's simply just a foundational technique that we use to construct a support system, a foundational system in the ground. and it provides us stability and support to protect the adjacent facilities and structures, which is going to allow us to dig a hole in the ground, to put it very simply, and construct the station from the ground up. It involves drilling multiple holes that overlap with each other, and these holes integrate with each other to form a wall, which provides a watertight barrier, allowing us to excavate safely. The analogy that I like to use in general is a swimming pool. So if you visualize a swimming pool, the secant pile is simply the pool perimeter, the walls. But instead of filling the hole that we dig with water, we will build a station instead. Next slide, please, Amanda. A little bit of extra detail on the piling program. So in order to install all of these piles, we will drill holes of various depths, ranging between 10 meters and 14 meters, and that's dependent on where the bedrock is. These piles are each about 1 meter in diameter or slightly wider, and as I detailed before, they interlock with each other to provide that cohesiveness and stability in a wall. We construct them with alternating piles. They are called either filler piles or reinforced piles, and the reinforced piles are just another drilled methodology with extra reinforcement, a steel beam inside, to provide extra rigidity. We use drilling machines and a tool called a casing to safely drill holes so that it doesn't fall in or collapse on each other depending on the ground conditions. And that allows us to auger into the bedrock and then coincidentally pour the secant piles to form the watertight wall. And as that process is completed, then, as I said before, we have a resulting perimeter wall that is going to allow us to construct the station. Some good visual cues here again to help provide some context on what this methodology looks like. The left picture with the excavator in it is a prime example of a tool that we call the guide wall. And what this is just a concrete formwork that initiates the start of each hole. And that allows us to make sure that we are drilling these holes in the exact location that we want in order to make sure that the wall is where it needs to be. And then on the right picture is a little bit of better visualization of how these circular piles or circular shafts interlock with each other and provide that barrier. Next slide, please, Amanda. And so more visual cues. This is what a piling excavation looks like after the piles have been completed and we look to excavate the swimming pool. You can see in the background of the right picture kind of the curvature of the piles in this specific construction site. Naturally, they have excavated inside the wall, and in doing so, they reinforce the wall with what we call shoring struts and wailers, more specifically. And Moss Park will be no different. Once we complete the piling wall, we will excavate down to the bottom of the shaft where the station is going to be installed. And we will use the same methodology that you see here with struts and wailers to help reinforce and protect the wall. And again, that's to ensure that the adjacent facilities, Sherbourne Street, Queen Street, Moss Park Arena, the Armory, and everyone's business and residence, that your building doesn't move or the ground doesn't move and everything stays as it should be. On the left here, more of a visualization for the alternation of the piles. Some of them are reinforced. Some of them are just what we call filler piles, which is purely concrete, okay? Next slide, Amanda, please. And here's a very elegant 3D model of what Moss Park, or what to anticipate in Moss Park, what the site is going to look like, specifically for the drilling commencement. What's highlighted here in the circles, in the pink circles, are the drill rigs. And so we are going to be using two rigs to start simultaneously. That is to keep our installation rate as per what we are expecting for the schedule. They will work in conjunction with each other, but obviously not on top of each other. They will be separated by a small distance. The location that they are in this picture are roughly the starting positions that we will begin in Moss Park. So one on the west side of the shaft towards the Armory, and then one somewhere intermediately on the south side facing towards Queen Street. In this 3D model, we do have representation of what the tower cranes will look like in Moss Park. But to be very clear, the tower cranes are not going to be installed during the piling operation. This is just to provide a futuristic look as to some of the other features people can expect to see in Moss Park. Next slide, please, Amina. Thank you. So let's talk schedule and sequencing, okay? As I detailed at the start, the piling works are ready to begin now. And that begins with the guide wall installation that I gave a little context in an earlier slide. So we will look to begin installing the formwork around the perimeter of the shaft. And then again, that's to properly locate where each of these piles are going to go. That's going to be starting immediately within the next couple days. For work hours, so we are always going to do our best to respect daytime working hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Obviously, that would be an effort to not have a major impact on people's evenings or sleeping hours in the local community. For an estimated timeline, with this operation beginning here in the next couple of days, the approximate time frame for this is 4 months duration, and so people can expect to see this relative consistency on a day-to-day time frame from now until the end of July specifically. Okay. And I have it here as an extra note, just as a caveat. So weekend work or extended hours may occur as needed. I want to reiterate and stress it is not our intention to exceed the daytime working hours. We have this as a caveat in a very special circumstance. For example, an example I can illustrate is, if we were to be drilling a pile in the afternoon and we get a weather event, it rains really, really hard for whatever reason we weren't anticipating. Then we would halt the operation temporarily. We wouldn't want to leave a hole or a shaft open overnight, as it would create a potential safety hazard. And so what would happen in those specific scenarios is we would wait for the weather event to pass, for example, and then complete the hole when it is safe to do so. In this event, maybe we poured the concrete for the shaft slightly after 7 p.m., but this is not a general expectation. Again, it's our goal to respect the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. timeframe every day if possible, okay? Okay, some things to expect from the community standpoint. So in conjunction with what we've been doing to prepare for the piling operation, we have become well-versed with the community specifically in terms of some specific impacts. 3 major topics are noise, vibration, and the air quality. I mean, specifically with dust. And so naturally, we'll always look to mitigate these as best as we can. And we'll touch on a few of those mitigation factors that we will be using to help reduce these impacts. But it stands. I mean, some of these will be a feature during the piling operation, hopefully to a lesser extent. Some of the equipment that we expect to use and what you can expect to see on site are going to be the drill rigs, obviously, which I detailed in the 3D model. We will have a crane, a mobile crane on site to help with the lifting methodology of the steel piles, for example. There will be an excavator to help with the installation of the guide wall. And then naturally, we'll use some concrete pumps and concrete trucks to deliver and install the concrete for each of the piles, okay? As I said before there, we will have daily cycling of trucks to deliver the concrete to Moss Park. We'll touch a little bit more on that in a couple minutes. And with this interaction of construction vehicles entering and leaving the site, we will always have certified flaggers at the entrance of Sherbourne and the exit of Queen. And that's to ensure the safe and positive interaction between construction vehicles and the continued usage of the sidewalks with the public. The last note here is that the piling equipment will remain within the work site for the duration, which will be the midsummer timeframe, as I detailed before. Okay, some reducing factors that we are looking to implement to promote this experience and have as little impact as possible in the community. So more on the construction vehicles here. As I said before, we will be having a daily flow of concrete trucks to the Moss Park site. To provide a little extra context, our expectation is to install approximately 6 piles per day, 6 of those shafts per day, and each shaft takes 2 concrete trucks to pour. So, basic napkin math would detail that we should be expecting roughly 12 trucks, concrete trucks, to enter and leave Moss Park daily. And that would be scattered throughout the daytime working hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., depending on when each of the shafts are being poured. The trucks will enter off of Sherbourne into the site, coming north from the Sherbourne-Queen intersection, and naturally they'll leave through the Queen Street exit, heading west towards Jarvis to head south afterwards. One implementation that we're looking to promote is an always forward methodology, and this is in an effort to reduce any backing up of vehicles or construction vehicles. I think most people who have been around a construction site before have become accustomed to the beeping of the reverse alarms, which can be seen certainly as a nuisance. So with this concept, we always look to strive to have vehicles and construction equipment and delivery concrete trucks driving forward to eliminate those to eliminate that impact. Okay. Additionally, there are no expected lane closures with this operation, so no interruptions to the 501 Queen Street car service, no interruption to the Sherbourne bus stops, no interruption to the sidewalk or the public parking facilities along Queen Street. Touching more now on those three impacts that we have been working with the community thus far. So air quality is a big deal, especially for us. We always want to promote an environment that people want to be around and not feel suppressed by. And so air quality is a big factor in that. We do have air quality monitors within and around the site to measure any dust or debris that would be generated from the site. As we move in towards the summer timeframe here and through what would be a winter thaw, but nonetheless a wetter season. As we move into the summer and things dry up, we will have water on site, for example, to suppress any dust generation and keep the air quality as clean as possible, of course. The site hoarding, which is that perimeter fencing that I detailed before, is a mitigating factor in terms of noise generation. I'll provide a little bit of extra context on that here in the coming slide. As I detailed before, daytime working hours are very important for us to maintain, to respect people's evenings and sleeping timeframes. I've talked about the continuous trucking loops to reduce the reverse alarms, and then as required, we'll always have capacities to keep the public interface clean. So in the form of street sweepers or wheel cleaning devices, which you can see in the picture here is what we call a shaker mat or mud mat. Promotes any silt or debris that's would be on a construction truck, for example. It stays within the site and does not get tracked onto the sidewalks or the public roads. Next slide, please. Okay, specifically on some noise reduction methodologies. Most importantly is the hoarding. So it does have a noise absorption barrier installed in between the two plywood facing that we have around the perimeter, and this is to reduce the noise impact, obviously, that's generated within the site and contain it within the site. We will continue using the operations that I have talked about, daytime working hours, no elimination of reversing trucks, and all of that is in effort to help reduce the noise generated within the site. Ultimately, similar to the air quality, we do have the noise and vibration monitoring systems as well. These are around the site perimeter in some of the local buildings, and these are to monitor the impact we have on the community, keeping us compliant in regards to noise and vibration generation in Moss Park. And then lastly, some comments about some vibration. So with the site preparation, we did have material compaction, and I think that was well illustrated in an earlier picture. Having to place some of the working platform material required some large machines to make sure it was properly compacted, and naturally that caused some vibration that would have been felt by some of the local community. Our goal is to reduce this as much as possible moving forward, and that'll be true with the piling operation as well. some examples of the mitigation. The left picture is what we call a drill rig skirt. This is honestly more related to sound suppression and an additional methodology that we will implement with the drilling process. But simply put, it's a skirt that goes around the drill, and it acts as an absorption barrier to help reduce the noise generated from the machines. And then the picture on the right, what's simply called a cleaning attachment, is another methodology that we'll use within Moss Park. And if you're familiar with how a drill works, when it pulls the spoils out of the ground, the auger typically shakes back and forth in order to make loose the debris and clean all the dirt off that would be in the auger. This tool automatically cleans the auger as it comes out of the ground. So it eliminates that jostling and shaking and noise generation of what the drill would create having to shake the auger off. So again, these features are all in an effort to help minimize the impact that we have on the community, because obviously we want to construct this without making this a negative experience for anyone. And I think with that, I can hand it back to Sean.
Thanks so much, Eric. We've went through the presentation, and perfect timing. We want to have some good amount of time for people to ask their questions. Before that, I just wanted to also welcome any elected officials or their staff to this meeting, and if there's media present as well, for media to email our mediarelations@metrolinx.com email address. So without further ado, I'd like to go to our first question coming in from Slido, and then we will go to the voice system. Just as an update on how to use voice to ask your question, you'll go on your desktop, laptop, or Chromebook and hit the raise hand sign. That'll put you in a queue, and we'll go to you in order. We'll go back and forth between the Slido and voice. And I'll let you know that you've been enabled, that your mic is enabled, and then you'll need to unmute yourself. And just a reminder that if there's a dialog box that comes up asking to use your microphone on your web browser, you must click the allow button or else the voice won't work. And if there's any audio issues, of course, you can put your question into the Slido as an alternate. So we'll leave that up in a moment. And if you're joining on your smartphone, similarly, you'll use the hand feature to raise your hand, and that'll put you at the top of the queue for asking a question. And then again, I'll enable your mic and you'll unmute to speak. So let's go ahead with the first question. And this question is going to go to Aga. The question is, I work shift work requiring me to sleep in the day. Will the construction be loud enough to disrupt sleep? How will you be mitigating noise?
Oh, hello again. We'll be looking into various mitigation here. Also, the question is how far the person who is asking that question live, because as you can imagine, with the distance, the level of decibels are dropping. So we may not have too much noise to deal, but we are always welcoming feedback. We want local community to talk to us, so we can look on daily basis what caused noise, where is the issue, what kind of mitigation can be implemented. We closely work with our site teams and also with Metrolinx to mitigate as much as possible.
Great, thanks, Saga. So not seeing any questions coming in from voice. Just as a reminder, if you do want to raise your question through voice, you'll need to raise your hand by using the hand button, and then we'll enable your mic, and then you'll unmute from there. So let's go on to another question from our Slido. So a question for Eric. Eric, so can you talk about the accessibility features at Moss Park Station? So things like elevator access, washroom facilities, getting in from the street. Could you speak to accessibility, please?
Of course, good question. So in the Moss Park station, there will be full accessibility for all personnel. That'll be in the form of escalators, elevators. There will be elevators installed within the station. In terms of facilities, it will have washroom facilities and other interactive features for a daily consumer, but very much a modern station in terms of both accessibility and resources to make a commuter's life simplistic. Daniel, I don't know if you wanted to provide any extra context to that discussion, or?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just correct. So there won't be washroom facility, public washroom facing facilities. There will be washroom facilities for staff at Moss Park, but for the public, it will be located at the policy is that we'll have washroom facilities at interchange stations and terminal stations for the Ontario Line project. And that the closest location here would be Queen or Osgood stations, which will hopefully be less than a few minutes away. But yeah, thank you, Eric, for the rest of the answer.
Great, thank you.
Sean, this is
Yeah.
Francisco Metcalf, Environmental Manager with OTG. I was having some technical difficulties and I joined as a guest. Should any
Good.
environmental questions needed to be fielded my way, I'm also in
Okay.
attendance.
Thank you so much for that. We'll definitely call on you if we have some questions there. Okay, so the next question from Slido, and just as a reminder, if you want to add questions through Slido, you can scan the QR code that's on your screen or visit slido.com, code number 1314749. So let's go to our next question. Again, a question for Eric. Are there any alternative methods being considered for the piling drilling project? And if so, what are they?
All right. So yes, the analysis was done in the design portion of the phase for the alternative piling methodologies, or to be more specific, shoring methodologies. Typical operations in this type of environment are pile driving, which I kind of detailed before. That is a cheaper alternative, truthfully, but it is extremely invasive, extremely loud. It involves the hammering of steel piles or sheet piles into the ground with hammers and vibrations, and it has a very large negative impact associated with that. So not really a proficient solution in this type of environment. Other solutions involved what we call like shoring and lagging. These ones have other disadvantages associated with those. Some of them involve like dewatering requirements, for example, where infiltration from the groundwater would go within the site. And if we were to pump that water out, as an example, then it would affect the local community's water table, which again, mostly negative impacts in that capacity. So yes, without going into a lot of engineering detail, we have looked at alternatives. We believe that the secant pile is the safest, most proficient, and most importantly, the least impactful on the community in this area.
Thanks, Eric, for that. So our next question again is coming from Slido, and just we'll remind folks too, you can also bring up your questions through voice if you prefer. Just raise your hand and we'll go from there. So the next question is around the noise impacts again. So question for Aga or Eric. Maybe we'll go to Aga first. How loud will the piling activities be? So earlier you spoke about how far away the person is from the source of the noise. So the question is, how loud will the piling activities be? And can you speak to how far the sound will travel?
So from our recent observations, the piling noise as it is on site is around 85, 90 decibels. Usually you would lose 6 decibels per 1 meter. So if we are talking 5-meter distance, that you are losing 30 decibels. If we are talking further distances, you are losing even more. So with hoarding around the site, with noise barriers, we should be able to lose quite a lot of that noise from piling activities.
Sean, I would like to expand on that if you allow me, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Just also wanted to add that we have developed a construction noise and vibration management plan where we have modeled prediction of the noise and vibration levels to be expected for each of the different phases of construction, right? And specifically for pile driving, that construction activity or feature of work has been modeled, and based on our prediction assessment, we have come up with mitigations to be implemented to help reduce and maintain the noise and vibration levels within allowable limits. Also, we want to remind everybody we are constantly real-time monitoring noise and vibration through separate monitoring stations installed throughout the project area. These devices do have telemetry capability, so we get real-time instant notification if we are perceiving a trend that will exceed an allowable level. So we have good time to implement a change in that trend so that it doesn't become an exceedance.
Sorry, just for my sake, when you say telemetry, could you explain what that means and exceedance as well, just so we're clear on?
Yeah, absolutely. So these monitoring station devices for noise and vibration and air quality as well have telemetry capabilities, meaning that just like your cell phone, they can communicate instantly when a level is triggered, and we get instant notification via email. And in that email, we can access remotely the device and listen in or hear the recorded level that triggered that exceedance. So that's the telemetry capability of these pieces of equipment. And the second part of the question, please remind me, I got distracted.
So when you say exceedance, that means?
Oh, yes. When we talk about exceedances, is that we're following the City of Toronto bylaws and the project agreement. So there it is clearly defined what the allowable threshold limits are for operations um, um, for both noise vibration, and those set levels are basically our benchmark. This is where we do not want to get above, and everything is modeled and coordinated to be implemented and constructed to not exceed that. Sometimes there are exceedances, but if that happens, we'll know immediately.
Okay, thank you, and take action to address it. Definitely,
Correct.
thank you. So in a similar question, Eric, could you speak to some measures that are being taken, some specific measures to minimize disruptions to residents and businesses during the piling process?
Of
Sorry,
course.
during the drilling process, pile drilling process.
Yeah, so I'll take that question as, as the daytime approach to having the area be not impacted by our operations, specifically for residents and business. And so, on top of all of the features that I would have detailed there in the slide program there for mitigation effects, our methodology, our restrictive factors with like the hoarding, the skirt, the tools and attachments that we're using to make Moss Park a pleasant place to be. I think pleasant is the word that we're striving for, right? We don't want negativity associated with what's usually associated with construction, right? I would even take that a step further and say, even with the perimeter fencing right now, it's painted black, mostly as a mitigation measure for some graffiti measures that are trending in the area. But the ultimate goal is to have pleasant artwork and information features there to make Moss Park an area that people will want to be, and not negatively impacted by the construction process. So with all of those features and the efforts that that collectively, and I say collectively through Metrolinx and through OTG, the delivery partner, is to have Moss Park be a place where people aren't deterred to go based on the construction practice.
Great, thanks, Eric, for those answers. And certainly, if you have any concerns that arise as you're out and about with your day, we would encourage people to call our hotline 416-202-5100, and we'll put that in a PowerPoint slide at the end of the presentation, or to email our community engagement team at ontarioline@metrolinx.com. And now we'll go to a question on the voice. So we have a question from Bai. I'm going to enable your mic, and if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Sean. So I think this should go to Eric. How many, you said there will be about 12 concrete mixer trucks coming in. What about how many trucks would be taking away the debris? And do you guys have a policy for idling of trucks?
Absolutely. Yep. Great question. It's a 1-to-1 ratio to answer your question directly. The amount of concrete that we put in terms of cubic meterage is the amount of spoils that we pull out and remove from the site from dirt and or rock, depending on if we're drilling into the rock at the very bottom of the shaft. So if we would expect 12 trucks a day to enter the site with concrete, then coincidentally, approximately 12 trucks worth of triaxles, as an example, to remove the spoils from site. To be very specific with the answer, though, it won't be, spoil removal will not be on a day-to-day basis. So in order to make that process a little bit more proficient and effective, we would look to remove the spoils from site in bunches, let's call it. And, that may involve a string of 20 or 30 holes worth of spoils that we make into a stockpile and then load consecutively and quickly to remove from site. So I would set the expectation that the 12 concrete trucks will be consistent throughout the duration of the installation, but the triaxles, what we call the triaxles, will be periodic and sporadic for when we have enough spoils to remove from the site. In terms of idling, there is no expectation for idling trucks, and I mean that's a strict policy on our side. We do not want to be having trucks idle because that's money lost, to be very clear. So a concrete truck will come to site. It will offload its material, which typically takes 15 to 20 minutes to offload. And same thing with the triaxles. Let's allot a similar time frame to load the spoils into the back of the truck, 10 to 15 minutes, and then it's back off onto the road. So we do not anticipate having idling trucks sitting there for this process specifically.
Thanks, Eric, for that. We'll turn next to Aga for this question on vibration. There's certainly been a number of questions around noise impacts, but a community member is wondering how much vibration can residents in the area expect to experience during the piling activities? Aga, could you take that question, please?
Hello, yeah. So similarly to noise, we are monitoring daily and we perform basically live monitoring of vibration as well. So monitors are placed around our works. We don't expect community to feel any vibrations at present. I probably could do with a little bit from Francisco, who's been on the project for more than a year, so he could probably explain a little bit more. But yeah, again, as with noise, we constantly monitor. We get emails on the levels. We investigate. But yeah, if Francisco can speak a little bit more about that as well, please.
Yes, thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, before the work even started, there is a construction noise and vibration management plan, and this activity, in this case, piling works, have been modeled into our program to determine or predict the vibration uh, expectations, and then to determine what mitigation needs to be done in order to reduce that vibration to the allowable, to be under the allowable thresholds. So hopefully we will not reach a situation where there is an exceedance, but if we are trending towards an exceedance, we know immediately, and it gives us time to evaluate and determine if anything needs to change before it becomes an actual exceedance.
Sean, I'll step in just as a little bit extra context as well. We've been dealing with this specific discussion in Moss Park already thus far with the installation of the working platform. So as I alluded to before, the material placement and rigorous compaction has resulted in vibrations that have been felt by the community. I have been in the local community buildings myself to feel the impact on some of those in some of those specific scenarios, and have a very good understanding on kind of the perceptibility of the construction activity and how they're perceived by at least the most immediate local community. So for extra context on everyone and to help everyone understand, our limits that Aga and Francisco were detailing are the our limitations that make sure that we are keeping the area ultimately safe. Yeah, vibrations would insinuate ground movement and deterioration to local infrastructure or facilities, and those limits prevent any of that interaction. So that's first and foremost the most important thing to detail. It does not mean that you will not feel a vibration at any point. I think it's our responsibility to make that transparent. Having said that, as I've detailed before, I think we have a very good understanding of what you can expect to feel. And so based on the practice that we've done thus far, local residents in the immediate vicinity, and when I say immediate, like I say on the south side of Queen Street or on the east side of Sherbourne, there are very isolated instances of vibration perception, human perceptibility, when we are working immediately across from the building. As we move away with compaction methodology, and it should be true with the piling as well, it very quickly drops off. So in this scenario where a local resident would feel vibrations, for example, please be reminded that I will be installing 5 to 6 piles every single day. So very quickly, I will be moving away from those local isolated areas, and any impact that you would feel, compliant or not, let's leave that part of the discussion aside. Any impact vibration that you would feel should be very isolated and very short duration, simply by the fact that I move on down the line very quickly. So I hope that provides a little extra context for the community. I know it's a very sensitive issue, and again, I want to do my best to sympathize and reduce that impact as much as possible. So it's only fair that we make that very clear about what to expect.
Great, thanks, Eric. So we have a number of questions still remaining, so just trying to manage our time here in the 6 minutes we have left. So the next question goes to Eric as well. How long will piling take, and what construction activities will come after that?
Sure, super simple. So we have 409 piles to install for the perimeter of Moss Park. I do 6 a day. Quick napkin math details, that's 80 working days to complete all of those. So 4 months. I will be installing pile between April and July. And upon completion of those piles, again, allows me to excavate the shaft afterwards. So once we finish those piling installations, then I will look to bring in machines to dig the swimming pool, to put it very simply, which will allow me to construct the station afterwards.
Thanks, Eric, for that. One more question around some dust impacts. So Eric, do we expect a lot of dust during piling, and is there anything that can be done to reduce the amount of dust that's coming off of the site?
For sure. So typically with construction sites, dust is generated by construction vehicle movement, right? Big, heavy trucks, big, heavy machines picking up dirt, throwing it into the air. And typically those are through the drier portions of the season, right? Through the summer, fall timeframe. We are installing the piles here through the spring and into the summer. So, you know, weather allowing, we should have natural dust suppression through some periodic rain. Nonetheless, if it's not raining and the spring is very dry, I know the weather has been devious to say the least in terms of the winter capacity. But if we have a dry spring and dry summer during the piling installations, with the concrete trucks, with the triaxles, with any construction vehicle that goes through the site, we will suppress the dust with water first and foremost. Water is the most effective way at keeping the dust down and on the ground. And you know, additional methodologies that I detailed before with like the mud mat, for example, helps keep the site clean in general from dust and debris. So those implementations will be enforced throughout the entire construction phase, to be very clear.
Thanks, Eric. That's great. So just a reminder, if you wish to submit questions through Slido, you can go to slido.com. The code's on screen, or scan the QR code with your phone. There was also a question around the presentation. We'll make sure that the presentation is posted to our website in the coming days and week. So look out for that presentation on our website. You can visit metrolinx.com/OntarioLine for the presentation, and you can find it there. Coming back to you, Eric, with another question around the sidewalks at site. Will they be impacted at all? I think you spoke a little bit about this in our presentation, but how can weather affect piling activities and cause delays?
Okay, double question, no problem. So for the sidewalk, as I detailed in the presentation, there is no closures expected for both the street and the sidewalk. The pedestrians and residents can expect to have full access to the Queen Street or Sherbourne sidewalks all the time. The only interaction to be aware of, and then again, this is for everyone's safety's sake, is our flaggers that we have at the entrance and the exit. So they will control the interaction of the construction vehicles entering or exiting the site so that there is no, you know, unsafe interactions between the public and those trucks. But you will always have access to the sidewalk during the piling operation. I can't even generate a unique circumstance as to why I would deviate from that expectation. So should be no impact on the sidewalk. For weather delays, a big part of the effort in preparing the working platform is to have consistency in the construction program, right? And so if we look at the weather that we had this week, for example, a light dusting of snow, this is the type of weather that would not affect the piling operation. We would continue to drill and pour concrete through this type of weather. It's only when we get heavier weather events like heavy rain, unsafe conditions generated by lightning, for example, that would slow us down. But I say that with the caveat is that it should never impact the full duration of the construction program. So when I say piling should be done from April until end of July, I'm expecting that I'm going to lose, you know, half a day or a day here and there due to weather. And of course, there's always mitigation efforts to make sure that I do my best to maintain the schedule. So big picture, no, the weather should not impact the piling operation.
Great, thanks for that, Eric. One more question for you, Eric, and a question for Daniel. So they're connected together. The question for you, Eric, is when will the Moss Park station be completed? And there's also a question for Daniel about the completion of the overall Ontario line. So we'll start off with you, Eric. When are we expecting the Moss Park station to be completed?
Yeah, very good. I'm going to answer that question in terms of perceptibility from the public. So, you know, by the 2028, late 2028, early 2029 timeframe, Moss Park is going to look fairly complete. And what I mean by that is the station would have been installed in the ground. The head house at the intersection of Queen and Sherbourne is going to be looking very complete. Landscaping of the local area to restore it back to the park features will be relatively complete. And it will look like a functioning station. That's not to say that it's open for service. So I will relay part B of that answer to the completion of the full Ontario line. And of course, Daniel is better to answer that than me.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so what happens after Eric's team and the OTG team complete the station construction is that we have another contractor that comes in and helps with the commissioning. Well, actually, they help with the conduct the construction of the tracks and commissioning of the station, and that will take a few years after the construction of the station. And so we're expecting the Ontario line will be completed around 2031.
Great, thanks, Daniel. So those are our questions from Slido today. Thanks everyone for coming to our session today. And you're seeing some renders here of the future trains. And we'll also show the slide on how you can get a hold of us. So as I mentioned earlier, our community engagement team is in the community. We're near Queen and Broadview at 770 Queen Street East, so you're always welcome to come by there. And you can email us at ontarioline@metrolinx.com. Our 24/7 telephone number is 416-202-5100. And we encourage folks to join the Ontario Line e-newsletter, where you can get progress updates and construction notices by visiting metrolinx.com/OntarioLine. And as I mentioned earlier, the presentation will be there as well. So going 2 minutes over, thank you for giving me that extra time, and thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and we'll sign off from here. Have a good night, everyone.